Flinders Street driver Saeed Noori rambled about Allah, Australia's spy agency ASIO and the mistreatment of Muslims in the hours after the attack, police say. Police revealed more on Friday afternoon about what the 32-year-old drug addict told them as investigators continue to search for a motive behind the rampage. It comes as Mr. Noori was discharged from hospital and into police custody, where he is set to spend the night before being formally interviewed by homicide detectives on Saturday. He has not yet been charged. Acting Chief Commissioner Shane Patton said police have not ruled out terrorism, but the only clue that suggested a possible link was what Mr. Noori told investigators in St. Vincent's Hospital on Thursday night. The alleged attacker not only spoke about mistreatment of Muslims, Mr. Patton said, he also referenced Allah and ASIO. We haven't ruled out terrorism and we continue to explore it. I've said that from the outset, but it's about not jumping to conclusions. It's about exploring the evidence, and the evidence will ultimately take it where it does, and if that means it's a terrorist event, so be it, Mr. Patton said. Video Justin accused Flinders Street attacker Saeed Noori in police custody after being released from hospital. Latest on 7 News at 6 p.m. #7newspic. Twitter.com/2mookofmoo6p. 7 News Melbourne at 7 News Melbourne December 22, 2017. Police searched Mr. Noori's home in Heidelberg West, where he was living with a relative, and the home of family in Oak Park. They seized computers and materials which, so far, have not revealed any motivation. ASIO had nothing in its intelligence holdings on Mr. Noori, Mr. Patton said. It would almost be easier to explain, Mr. Patton said, if it were a clear-cut case of terrorism. I don't have an issue with saying this is an act of terrorism if we establish that it is. It would be easier to come out and say that straight up. But that's not the case at this stage. We don't have sufficient evidence to justify that, he said. How do you try and get into someone's head to understand what would cause them to commit such a horrific act? The only way you can do that is methodically work through it and examine all of the evidence, which is what we're doing. If that means in 2 days, 2 months, 2 weeks or whatever, we get some shred of evidence that shows us this was a terrorist attack, we don't shy away from that and we charge them. But we don't have that level at this time. 19 pedestrians were injured when Mr. Noori allegedly mowed them down at the busy Elizabeth Street intersection along Flinders Street at 4:41 p.m. on Thursday. 3 people remain in a critical condition, the worst of whom is an 83-year-old man from Northcote in Melbourne's north. The 4-year-old South Korean boy from Hoppers Crossing remains in a stable condition. Mr. Noori, who police said had a long history of drug abuse and mental illness, has a prior criminal history of unlicensed driving, using a mobile phone while driving and failing to answer bail. He was not on bail at the time of Thursday's attack, police said. He was voluntarily subject to a mental health plan with a local hospital. The reality is, he wasn't on our radar, Mr. Patton said. We weren't suspecting he'd be doing anything like this at all, and it appears randomly, a horrific attack in the middle of the city. Without being a known person of interest, without any warnings, without any intel, without anything, yet still being monitored, apparently compliant on a mental health program and voluntarily participating. Police are still tracing Mr. Noori's movements from Thursday. The car he was driving, a white Suzuki, belonged to someone in his family. Mr. Noori arrived in Australia from Afghanistan at 18 in 2004 before becoming a citizen in 2006. He spent recent years in Melbourne's northern suburbs, far removed from the heartland of the city's Afghan population in the outer southeast. He regularly walked home from the hospital where he received treatment for his mental illness. It's believed he previously worked in a trade. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said Mr. Noori came to Australia as a refugee through the normal refugee programs, not via a people smuggling operation. Mr. Turnbull said the alleged offender had no known links to any political issues or extremist groups. Therefore, the position I'm advised is that no terrorism link has been established, he said.